Good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to our Explore STEM Careers webinar. We are excited and fortunate to have Meagan Pollock from the National Alliance for Partnerships and Equity presenting with us today. And again, this is kind of a part 2 in a 3-part series for the CTE Counseling Academy. So if you have not yet already, be sure you get registered for our May 23rd event. With that, I'm going to hand the floor over to Meagan and let her walk you through our exciting and engaging webinar.
All right, good morning, everyone. I am glad to be here with you today, and I hope that you come ready to engage because the webinar is best set for those of us who are going to participate and learn in this time. If I did not get the chance to meet you when we met before earlier this year, I want to introduce myself. I care about STEM careers because I am an engineer. And I know what it's like to be the only woman sitting around a boardroom table. And I took that passion that I had as an engineer and then put it really into my doctoral studies of really trying to figure out how do we increase the participation of women and people of color in these fields. And so what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be really discussing how the messages that we send and almost a bit of like a marketing pitch of what's the marketing message that we have when we talk about STEM. How is that maybe not helping us get students as engaged as we want them to be engaged? And so I hope that you'll participate with us as we go along. To get us started, I'd love to learn a little bit about who you are. And so if you'll put in the chat box your name, location, and role. Amy, I do want to make sure that they're able to chat. Is that correct?
Yes, everyone is able to chat, and
okay.
Apologize. Yes, everyone's able to chat, and if you have any questions, you can post those in the question pane. Throughout the webinar, you will be in listen-only mode, but if you do raise your hand, we will be unmuting you, so you'll be able to use your microphones if needed. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks. All right, so chat with me here. Put your comments in the chat box, your name, your location, and your role. I know we've got 5 of you online with us, so I hope to hear from the 5 of you. All right, it looks like we may be having some difficulties with the chat box. And so, Amy, if we could figure that out, that'd be great because that would really help us stay engaged while we're presenting here today.
They seem to be posting those into the question box. So there is a chat pane as well as a question pane, but we can use the question pane. That's fine. So yes, you have.
I'm not saying either.
Oh, okay. I'm going to give you complete control then there, Meagan. So you should be able to see everything I can see.
All right, so I do see some comments in the question box. So again, if we could figure out how to make the chat box work for everyone, that'd be beneficial. Oh, it looks like that is now set up. Okay, great. All right, so I see Whitney's joined us and Christina. Thanks so much for chiming in. Glad to have you today. So if you don't already have the NAPE's Explore STEM Careers Toolkit, then encourage you to look into getting that for yourself. The book is an overview of what we're going to be talking about, but certainly in much greater detail. And there are digital downloads for the worksheets that are in the toolkit. And what we'll be talking about today as well, that you can access at Teachers Pay Teachers or on our website, napeequity.org. And so if there are affiliated page numbers, you'll see those on the slides as well. So our goal today is to really focus on the fact that STEM careers are in demand. I don't think any of us are surprised by that, but opportunities are available for every student. And what this means is it sometimes includes the students who we don't always think about who would have the most interest in these kinds of careers. And so our goal today is to help equip you with messages to help you communicate the breadth of opportunities and pathways in STEM careers to your students. And we're going to draw on several National Academy of Engineering reports that really help equip us with that language that's going to best support every student's interests and needs. So to get us started, I want you to think about, what do the majority of your students think about STEM subjects, STEM careers, or STEM professionals? And so whether you're online live with us now, so you can add that to the chat box, or if you are tuning in later on the recording, I want you to take a second and think about, what do your students think about STEM? So share with us or write down in your notebook, what do you think your students think about STEM? Well, some of the most common images that come to mind are the sort of archetype of the caricature Dilbert. Dilbert is a cartoon character, and he's known for being sort of this very awkward, antisocial engineer who's relegated to his cubicle and has sort of the comedy of office life as an engineer. And then we've got repeated this same sort of archetype in the cast of like the Big Bang Theory. And then also in the Geek Squad, right? So these are very similar images, similar personalities that all of these different kinds of characters hold. And the truth is that there is some truth to these stereotypes, right? But one of the things that's so critical to this work that we do is to recognize that not all stereotypes tell the complete story. And if you've not had the opportunity to watch the TED Talk by Chimamanda Adichie called The Danger of a Single Story, I really encourage you to take some time to do this. It's about 14 and a half minutes, and I've seen it literally hundreds of times, and I enjoy it every single time. And the key takeaway from that TED Talk is she says, the single story creates stereotypes. And the problem with stereotypes is not that they are untrue, but that they are incomplete. They make that one story become the only story. So as an example, growing up, I grew up in Southeast Texas, and the primary industries there are paper mills and refinery plants. And when I looked around me, all of the people that I knew that were in sort of science and engineering roles looked a lot like Dilbert. And they also looked a lot like my dad. My dad is a tall, white guy, and he is a computer scientist, computer programmer, self-taught. And my granddad is as well. So when I was thinking about what it is that I wanted to be when I grew up, despite the fact that I was, top of my class and had taken every AP math and science class that had ever been offered to me, and I was like president of the robotics club, I started programming when I was in 8th grade. Despite all of those things, I didn't think STEM was for me. Because when I looked at people who were in these professions, they looked like my dad, or they looked like these archetypes that we see here. And I really didn't want to be a geek. I didn't want to be a nerd, and I didn't see myself related to these kinds of images. And what happened is the single story that had been told to me and the life that I had growing up, it didn't have a broad narrative and a broad view of what it could look like for me to go into science and engineering. And I'll bring us back to this quote, is it's not that those stereotypes are not true, right? Because it fits my dad. My dad can fit that stereotype. He's got some more style now, but it definitely fits that stereotype. And so what we want to do as educators is we want to begin to think about, how do we increase the narrative? How do we have more stories so that our students can see themselves pictured into all the different careers and pathways and opportunities that are available to them? So the next reflection question I want to offer to you is to reflect on, how has technology made a difference in your life or the lives of people that you love? So again, whether you're here with us live now or if you are listening to a recording, pause for a minute and think about, what are all of the ways that technology has influenced your life? Just a quick list. All right, so I hope that you're making a list of so many things that you can't even count them, right? So this morning when you woke up, I imagine that you woke up on a very soft mattress. Before the technology of mattresses came to be, people slept on like piles of hay. I think we can all agree that we like our mattresses way more than piles of hay. And then when you got up, you had power in your house, hopefully, and that power is certainly a technology that has made a difference in your life. Then you get up and you go into the restroom and you've got running water. Running water is a tremendous technology that's made a difference in our lives. And then maybe you started to brush your teeth. So first of all, you pick up your toothbrush and you pick up the toothpaste. The toothpaste is a highly engineered product that has, it's more than the baking soda that maybe our great grandmothers used. And also your toothbrush that you're using, original toothbrushes were like little bound sets of sticks. That's how they brush their teeth. I think we could all agree also that the toothbrush is a great invention. If you have the powered toothbrush that does so much of the work for you, right? Technology is in so many parts of our life, and then you come downstairs and then you go to make your coffee and maybe you have a fancy coffee maker or you have a very simple coffee maker. Either way, technology is involved in how those things were created. And those are some of the practical things. And then you can think of examples like GPS. I constantly ask my parents, like, how did you function before there were maps in your digital maps in your hand, right? And my mom and dad always say, well, we got lost a lot. And so these things have really made a difference in our lives, just having so much access to different kinds of things. And then you can switch to think about some of the medical devices that have benefited us. Maybe you have a family member or yourself have some sort of implant that helps your body do the things that we would hope it would normally be able to do. So whether that's a pacemaker or whether that's a stimulator, or there are so many different kinds of things that really help us. So think about simply like the anti-lock brakes that are on your vehicles. The anti-lock brakes have been, I think, around for most of my life, but from what I understand before then, like when you would slam on your brakes, you were still bound to have an accident. But the anti-lock brakes, it uses a MEMS device, which is a microelectronic-mechanical system, and it has two parallel plates. So it uses that same physics technology that maybe you learned a long time ago, and it measures the pressure and force of that as it's moving, and it helps your brakes not lock up. So instead of locking down, it kind of pads them as you're coming to a stop. These are amazing inventions that have kept us safer in our lives. One of the tools that you have available to you is one of the National Academy reports. And you can find that at engineeringchallenges.org. And so they brought together like some of the greatest minds in the world, not just in the US, and they asked them to create a list of what are the biggest challenges that we face in this century that they also think that we would be able to solve within this time. And they came up with 14. Why 14? I don't know, but that's what it came down to. And so you see some of these in the list here. And why this is important is this is the why. This is why we want students and why we need STEM professionals. We need people who are working to solve these problems. If you take a scan at a list there, you'll see that there are some things that maybe we don't know anything about, but some things that make more sense. So look for example at the providing access to clean water. You know, I think maybe 10, 15 years ago, I would have never thought that this was something that was important in our country. But as we've seen the news about Flint, Michigan, and so many other communities that don't have clean water, this is here at home and something that we need to fight and face. In fact, in the community that I grew up in the region, one of the towns that we used to play in sports, they were on Erin Brockovich, so we all remember Erin Brockovich and her awesome work that was in the film with Julia Roberts. She has Bridge City on her list as one of the cities that has the least access to clean water, and a lot of that's as a result of some of the hurricanes that have come in and flooded that area. And when I found out about that a couple of years ago, it really just was hit me really close, literally close to home, to where I grew up, right? Thinking about my friends and my neighbors and the people that I have known for so long cannot get clean water in their communities and their urban communities. And then we can think about things like engineering better medicines. There are so many health issues that people face that we don't have the medicines to solve right now. And so we need people working and solving these different kinds of problems that people are facing. One of the opportunities that I've had to be engaged with is with an organization called Batten Hope. And the website's battenhope.org, BATTENHOPE.org. And what we're trying to do as an organization is we're trying to do essentially some rewiring genetics for young children who are missing a key part of their DNA. And that missing part of their DNA creates a neurological disorder that's making their bodies essentially shut down. So imagine, if you can remember back to science class, we're made up of tons of little cells, and these cells are like little cities. They have functions, so they pump things in and they pump things out. But when you have Batten disease, and the specific strain of Batten disease, the one that we're focused on is CLN7, it doesn't have the part that's pumping the bad things out of the cells, so the waste out of the cells. And so what that means is that all of the cells are literally dying in this little boy. And so we're working with we're working with UT Southwestern and some researchers and doctors there who are designing a way to lay on his genes, to lay on that DNA as sort of patch that fixes the missing part of that DNA. And so this is saving babies' lives, right? And the same technology the information that we'll learn from that test will go on to help people who have Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, right? And I think so many of us can find someone in our networks that have suffered from those diseases as well. And so you can see that there are so many different kinds of ways that our students can look to the future and figure out the kinds of problems that they're going to solve. And this is the why, right? Now think about some examples of your favorite or maybe the most memorable car commercials. The Super Bowl was, not too long ago, and think about, if you watch that, some of the car commercials that you see. What you see is usually a very fancy car that sort of comes into the scene, and it paints a picture of a lifestyle, right? It paints a picture of sort of glitz and glamour, but it doesn't, if ever, provide a price tag of what these vehicles cost. The one that has always stuck in my mind was a commercial for the Cadillac Escalade. And so it sort of started in like the scene of like ancient Egypt, where they were carrying the sort of king and queen or of some sort in Egypt on an elephant, and then it ends up with the scene of this, beautiful couple in their driveway with a Cadillac Escalade. This is painting this picture, right? And it starts with this big why. It doesn't start with the price tag, right? So some of the cars on the lower end of the spectrum, those commercials, which aren't generally featured in the Super Bowl as a Super Bowl commercial, start with a price tag, right? And so what our students so often see when it comes to STEM careers is they see the price tag. They see this sort of stereotype that it's hard, that it's going to take too long, that it's not for me, and they have all of these reasons. But we would be better served in increasing their interest and motivation to pursue STEM courses and ultimately a STEM pathway by hooking them with, here's the difference that you can make. Here's how you can change the world. Here's what our world needs you to do. And so think about these different grand challenges. If you go to the website engineeringchallenges.org, there are lots of different activities that are available to you to bring this into the classroom and to bring this in how you interact and engage with your students. So the next question I want to get you to think about is to think about the innovations and themes that you listed in the last chat question. I want you to then think about, what are the qualities and skills that those individuals need to to create and innovate those different kinds of things. So again, if you're here with us, make a list. If you want to add those to the chat box, I welcome you to do that. Or if you're listening to the recording, again, pause and think about, for the people who are creating all of the brilliant innovations that we've just talked about, what kinds of skills and qualities are needed in those individuals to create these meaningful solutions that improve our lives? So I'll pause for just a minute. So somebody's added a comment that they are willing to fail and learn from their mistakes to make improvements. Absolutely. This is really key within STEM professions. Yes. Anything else? So things that we think of as we think about people who are creative, right? To come up with the kinds of solutions that we need to solve the problems and the innovations that we face, you must be creative. You've got to be able to work together with other people. So you've got to be a collaborator. You need to have critical thinking skills and problem solving skills to keep pressing on and being persistent in the face of challenges. Like Whitney added in the response, so she said that you have to be willing to fail and to learn from their mistakes. You know, when I was practicing as an engineer at Texas Instruments years ago, my degree is electrical engineering, but my role, I was called a product engineer. And one of the key things that I was responsible for, and particularly aligned with my master's thesis, was I was trying to figure out how to kill the devices. We worked on a technology. I'll show you a picture of it here in a second. And the technology was called a digital micromirror device, which is also a MEMS technology that's sort of built on the same kind of way that I talked about the ABS chip, the anti-lock brake system chip. And so it was totally the antithesis of how I had been educated. You know, I'd been educated to like be perfect and to get everything right and to never fail. And then I get into my first job and they're like, we need you to fail as often as possible. And my brain just like wasn't wired that way. And so I had to really learn and figure out how do I fail as often as possible so that we can learn from that. And so that is absolutely a key to what STEM professionals need to be able to do. So I want to introduce to you another National Academy study, and it's called Changing the Conversation. And you can find this information about this study at engineeringmessages.org. And what they did is it was literally a market analysis study, and the professionals came together, and the study was commissioned because they said students and people in general don't know what engineers are and what engineers do. And so what they did is they went to engineers and they asked them, what do you do? And so what they came up with was a long list of sort of skills and traits and contributions that engineers make. And then they boiled those down into some sort of statements. And then they got students to rate the statements that were most meaningful and impactful to them. And so what they ended up with were 3 key statements, and these were the statements that resonated with particularly women, but they were also messages that resonated with all of our students, regardless of race and gender and class. And while the study was specific to engineering, I've broadened it here to include STEM in general, and I feel absolutely okay doing that because no engineer works alone. Every engineer works with lots of professionals across the STEM spectrum of disciplines. And so the 3 key messages that came out of the study is that 1, STEM professionals make a world of difference and help shape the future. And so think back to the list of things that you made, all of the innovations that have impacted your life, and whether how you woke up this morning and all the things that you engaged with. STEM professionals have transformed how we live, and they will continue to transform the future in which we will move into. And so we depend on these skill sets, and we depend on the individuals who are in these professions to continue creating new technologies. second key message is that STEM careers are essential to our health, our happiness, and our safety. And one of the things we're going to talk about is how we can sort of better describe these different kinds of ways that STEM careers are essential to these different kinds of ways. But again, if you think back to the technologies that you listed, they probably were going to land in one of these three buckets. Either they are technologies that improve our health, like pacemakers and any kinds of medical machines that make it doctors have better access to heal us. Happiness, and whether that's your GPS, your iPhone, your Apple Watch, or any amount of technology that's in your home that makes us have happier lives, to have the conveniences that we do have. And then finally, safety. We have technology that improves how we drive, which is like the anti-lock brake system. We have technology that improves, one could argue that the GPS makes our lives safer because we're not driving around lost all the time. And then you can think about, the roads that we drive on, and there's just so many ways that we can look at that STEM and how it's contributed to our health, our happiness, and our safety. And the third key message that came out of the study is that STEM professionals are creative and collaborative problem solvers. I remember growing up and thinking that STEM professionals weren't creative, because it's very typical in our world to sort of create polarizations, right? You are either this or that. You are either in the band or you're an athlete. You are either smart or you're not. They're all different kinds of sort of polarizations that happen in grade school and even as in our adult world. And for me, one of the things that was always so distinctive is you're either an artist or you are a math person, and those things never crossed over. And this was really frustrating for me, because I have always loved being very creative. I love surrounding myself with art. I love the process of designing and creating things. And I thought, well, if I love this, then STEM is not for me, because that's for people who just love that, right? And that's so not true, right? We need professionals who have creativity and can solve some of these amazing problems that we face in our world. And they must be collaborative problem solvers. As an engineer, you do not work alone. You will work in teams, and you're working with different kinds of professionals. I was working in our fab, so I would have to put on what we call our bunny suits, so you're like all covered so that no dust falls off of you. I would have to put that on and go and do work on the testing and the manufacturing machines, and then I'd come out, and then I'd go into the boardroom so that I'm presenting, and then I'd go to another building where they're having we have another test lab, and so you're collaborating with so many people. In addition, I'd be on the phone at 10 o'clock at night with Singapore and Malaysia or the Philippines, because that's their work hours, and that's where a lot of our products are being manufactured. And so we're collaborating with people all over the world. And then finally, there is no STEM without solving problems. And so again, boiling this down, these are the three key messages. So if the STEM careers and the way that you talk about STEM careers don't start with these three messages, these are the three most effective positive ways to get our students interested and engaged and motivated to pursue STEM pathways. We want to make sure that we're using this and how we're talking about our courses and how we're talking about the different, even the informal activities that you might have on your campuses. We want to help our students see their future aligned to this. This is also particularly important for young women, because so many of our young women are gendered. They are raised from very early on in their lives to think that they are nurturers and to think that they want to help people. But they too often don't see that they can help people in a STEM profession. And so this is why we see such tremendous numbers of women who are in nursing pathways or even in biology, but we don't see them choosing pathways in computer science. We don't see them choosing pathways in engineering or physics at the same rate as some of these other professions and pathways that already have a little bit of that helping factor embedded into that image. And so again, we want to help our students see the connections, that you can help people, you can make a difference, you can shape the world by choosing a career in STEM. So let me give you another example. So as I mentioned, when I worked in industry, I worked on a device called the digital Micromirror device. And this is a picture of that device. Well, there are lots of different shapes that it comes in, but this is the particular device that is at the cinema. And so many of you have likely been to the cinema. And at this day and age, most of the theaters are digital cinemas. So they no longer are using the old tape and reel kind of things. And so at least 10 years ago when I was at TI, at that time, TI held the market share. So of all of the digital cinemas that existed, some like 90% of them at that time had these type of chips in the projectors in the back. And there weren't just one, there were three. And so you had three chips and each one was for one of the, a different color. And then what you see in the center, on this little gray square here, this is an array of tiny mirrors, and I'll show you a zoom in of that in a second. And then this is the gray part on the bottom is a ceramic plate, and then the top part is a mixture of gold that covers the little tiny mirrors, and then the dark gray around the silver part is glass. You can't see it, but it's glass. And so when we zoom in to look at that little tiny set of gray areas, this is what it looks like. And so what I have as a comparison on this image is an ant leg. And so what you see is that each of the tiny little squares are 1 pixel. So if you were to go, the best way to see this is like your projector on your campus. If you walk up to the projection screen, you'll see that there's lots of little tiny squares that make up the image. And you can certainly look up on the projector and see if it's a DLP projector. And what you'll then know is that for every little pixel that you see on that screen corresponds to 1 mirror that's embedded in this little gray silver center area. And each of these mirrors are 1 atom thick. Think about that. 1 atom thick, and they're made out of aluminum. So aluminum, what else is made out of aluminum? Cans, right? Soda cans are made out of aluminum. And so each of these are 1 atom thick tiny mirrors that we can turn on and off. And what you see in the image on the bottom left is what we call the superstructure. And so those are also depositions of different kinds of materials, and so it becomes a mechanical system. So we can turn each of those mirrors on and off, and they turn on and off so fast that your eye can't perceive them. And then you add in a color component that gives you the vibrant colors that you see. Now, when DLP first came out as a solution, the digital light processing, then we like won an Oscar. And so if you see, generally at the beginning of a film, you'll see if it was recorded using DLP cinema or if it's being projected using DLP cinema. And so they've won a couple of Oscars over time because it has influenced, and the technology has changed how digital pictures were made. And I have to say, as an engineer, I thought that was cool. You know, I liked saying that, we had worked to contributed to winning an Oscar. But at that time, and even today, I don't go to the movies very often, but what made the biggest impact on me was knowing that the technology I worked on helped babies. So how many of you have ever been to the doctor and they are trying to draw blood and they miss your vein? So then they keep poking you. It's awful, right? It's absolutely awful. Well, I care less about this big baby and more about little tiny babies like the little hand that you see on the screen here. And what happens is that we use the exact same technology that goes into the projectors that helps tiny babies or anybody or big babies. But what it uses is it uses the same digital micromirror device, so the same kinds of mirrors, and it uses infrared light. And so you can ask, I encourage you to always ask whenever they're working on you if they have a vein viewer. Typically, they're not like in the standard like blood drawing rooms. They're usually in the sort of the more emergent sections. And so you shine the vein viewer over the skin, and it illuminates where the veins are, so they can prick those veins and get those babies healthy much, much faster. I love this. I love that I was working on technology that was making a difference in this kind of way. And so why I'm telling you these stories is it's so important for us to help our students see that STEM is essential to not only our happiness. This is a picture of what one of the big digital cinema projectors looks like, but also essential to our health. That's a picture of the handheld portion of the digital Micromirror device. It also has this giant like tower behind it as well. And then also our safety. And what you see there is an example of what we call HeadUp Display. And so maybe you have a vehicle, or you've driven a rental car, or you've just seen these online, where the vehicles have projected onto the windshield or onto a little screen critical information. The first time I ever ran across this was I had a rental car somewhere in Colorado. I think it was a Cadillac Escalade, and I was just driving, and I went to call my dad, and it like popped up on it was the first time I saw it on the monitor or on the screen. I almost ran off the road, which defeats the entire purpose of the safety factor here. But I almost ran off the road because I was so thrilled, because I knew that, again, the same technology that I had worked on as an engineer was now in vehicles that are designed to keep us safer. And so I eventually pulled over and took a picture of this. I assure you that I was safe there. And now in my current car, I'm a Mini Cooper, and it has a head-up display too. And I have to say, it's probably the reason why I got the vehicle, is because I just was so excited to see that the head-up display using a projection system was in our car. And yes, it does make your driving experience safer, because you're not constantly looking down at your handheld device or even the center console. And so, again, it's this concept of health, happiness, and safety. And this is what we want to communicate to our students. So in the workbook that you either have or that you're going to get from Dr. Julian is a series of worksheets that you can use with students. And one of the worksheets is around health, happiness, and safety. And so you'll find in the workbook that there is a little worksheet and then some instructions for you and a lesson plan for how you can administer this activity with students. But again, the idea is to help students find connections amongst all the different STEM kinds of disciplines and how it affects our health, happiness, and safety. So again, you can find that in the book, and I encourage you to do that. Now, I want you to do a little bit of comparing and contrasting. So in the very first activity that you did, reflection that you did, is that you thought about, what do our students think about STEM? And so there was some comments on the sort of being a nerd or being awkward, and that sort of archetype of the Big Bang Theory or Dilbert or the Geek Squad. So I want you to compare that with the image description that you thought of about who are the innovators. What are those skills and qualities? So take a minute, whether you're here with us live or with your watching the recording, and think about, let's compare and contrast those images, those descriptions, those lists of what do your students think versus who are the people that are doing this amazing work that's changing our lives. So take a minute and think about that. And if you're with us, you can add those comments to the chat box. All right, so maybe some of the things that you identified is that there is a really broad disconnect between the images that your students hold and the image of the professionals, the skills and the qualities of those individuals who are doing this work. And what I want to encourage you to do, and as you take this work and move forward, is to continue thinking about, what are all the ways that your school may be inadvertently perpetuating some of those stale stereotypes. And how can you shift those images, those marketing, the strategies, the course content, whatever those things are, how can you shift those to better represent the 3 key messages from the National Academy? The messages that STEM professionals are creative and collaborative, that STEM careers are essential to our health, our happiness, and our safety, and that STEM professionals are creative and collaborative problem solvers. How can you shift the messaging to match these things rather than those sort of stale ideas about the sort of math and science death march that you have to be the best math person to do this? I have to tell you, as an engineer, only once did I do a calculus problem. And I only did it to say I did it. I didn't need to do it because I had the software that would do it. But I thought, you know, darn it, I've worked really hard to learn all of this calculus and math and differential equations. I'm gonna do this by hand. And I did it to say I did it. And so many types of engineering don't require you to do math in the way that so many of our students require. Yes, those courses for 4-year engineering degrees, yes, those students are going to be required to take some higher level maths, but the idea is to get you to be a problem solver and to understand how the math works so that you can use that to solve problems later on. And even if you are using software, to understand how the software is working. So I want to do a little bit of a review of sort of the fast facts to remind us on why this is important. And so when we look at the science and engineering workforce, it has grown at 5 times the rate of the general workforce since 1950. And even during the period of 2000 to 2009, when the economy was at significant economic decline, science and engineering was still growing at a significantly higher rate than the rest of the workforce. And this is going to continue to be the case. The second key thing to think about here is retirement. So many science and engineering workers are reaching traditional retirement age. So in 2006, the figure said that 26% of the science and engineering workforce were older than 50. And so what that means is that a quarter, if not more at this point, of our workforce is preparing for retirement. So what happens when a quarter of our science and engineering workforce exit? This is going to create a huge gap and vacuum in our proverbial pipeline of students heading into these pathways. When we look at what are the fastest growing careers, and again, this list changes every single year, but it has consistently maintained that about 75% of the fastest growing occupations requiring at least a 2-year degree are in STEM fields. So I want to repeat that 3/4 of the fastest growing occupations, and this has again been persistent over time, require at least an associate degree. So this is really critical to help our students understand the pathways that are available to them. One of the things that generally comes up when we brainstorm what is it that our students think about STEM is they tend to think of STEM equals 4-year or higher degrees. They're thinking of engineers who oftentimes need master's degrees, and they think of the doctors and things like that. But the reality is there's a significantly higher demand for students with 2-year degrees. And so this figure says that half of all STEM jobs are available to workers without a 4-year degree. So that means that even though I have a PhD in engineering, the odds of me getting a job are probably better with a 2-year degree than with a PhD. And so we want our students to begin to separate this notion of STEM equals the elite math and science individuals and understand that STEM is so much more, and the demand doesn't require some of the things that they so often think about. And the last fact I want to offer to you here is that when we look at the jobs that are available, so in 2011, the figure was 26 million, and I'm certain the number has increased by then. But at that time, 1/5 of all the jobs that are available require a high level of knowledge in any one STEM field. So even if the job isn't a STEM job, it could still require a high level of ability to function using some sort of STEM knowledge, whether that means that you are running, reports out of Excel spreadsheets, whether that means that you have to have a general knowledge of how different components of within a STEM field work. You've got to be able to have that to succeed in our workforce. And so again, I want you to take away from this conversation that there are multiple pathways and opportunities in STEM careers. And so certainly there are, in the full continuum of education that you can earn in this world. When we even look at the certificate or apprentice kinds of pathways, one of the most in-demand jobs right now are electricians. And electricians, that is absolutely a STEM job, particularly now as technology has increased. The buildings have become more and more technology dependent, right? And so helping our students find their ways into these careers, even with our vehicles. Like I said, I just got a new car, and there were some problems with the car already, and it was a computer issue. And so something had happened to one of the wires, and it took the people at the auto shop hours to figure it out because they were having to run tons of computer tests. Again, this is tremendous STEM knowledge that is required of them to figure these things out. It's not the same mechanics sort of bucket that we would put people in so long ago. To be able to do this work, you've got to have a tremendous amount of STEM knowledge, and it's really, really valuable in those pathways. And so again, helping our students find their way into STEM, into some of these high demand, high wage jobs amongst the continuum, whether they're going to be an electrician, which, as you probably know, like less than 2% of electricians are women. And so when we think about the fact that they are in high demand and that women who represent half of the workforce aren't choosing these careers, when we think about women in engineering, practicing women and engineers are about 13%, and there's so much opportunity for us to increase opportunities for people who are going into these pathways. And another thing is that an education in STEM enables so many career options and opportunities. I like to think of it as the perfect launching pad. A degree in STEM is a great place to start because it gives you amazing critical thinking and problem solving skills, and it allows you to launch to lots of different kinds of careers. Texas Instruments, as an example, if you want to be on their technical marketing and sales team, you must have a degree in engineering. So why do you think that is? In order to be someone that understands engineering and can sell and market products to engineers, you've got to know the language, right? And what's interesting about companies like TI is the technical sales, technical marketing, and technical sales groups. Those people who are in that profession or in that pathway within engineering generally have very different personalities than some of the others, right? And so they're very gregarious, and they have lots of different kinds of opportunities to travel and do other kinds of things. And so, there, again, no matter your personality or your choice, there are ways to enter into the industry in lots of different ways. Business leadership. 1 in 5 Fortune 500 CEOs has a degree in STEM. And why do we think this is? Because they're good problem solvers, excellent problem solvers. As you probably already know, there is a dearth of educators who have STEM degrees. We need people who have been trained to teach and to raise up our next generation of STEM professionals. And so you can go into that. You can go into patent law, and which is to be able to understand patents and to argue and fight and protect them. You've got to know, again, the language. And then finally, STEM professionals make great entrepreneurs. I have to tell you, when I was 18 and choosing my path and the degrees, so my undergrad's computer science and master's electrical engineering and PhD engineering education, amongst other things, I do run a couple of my own businesses. And those skills that I learned in my coursework, one, gave me a lot of confidence to be able to do the things that I need for my business. And it also gave me a lot of the skills so that I could do a lot of things on my own. I didn't have to outsource those things to other people. And so STEM professionals make great entrepreneurs because they have a lot of self-efficacy to try and try again. And they have a lot of skills that help transfer into getting things off the ground. The next activity and topic I want to shift to is around work values. And so if you are with us, I want you to think about this and add to the chat or to the question area. Or if you are watching the recording, I want you to pause and do this. But I want you to list and think about, what are the reasons why people may choose a career path? Why do people choose jobs? Why do they choose the pathways of work that they work towards? So take a minute and think about those different kinds of things. All right, so depending on your list, usually they distill down to these values that I'm going to introduce to you. When we think about how we choose work, there are values that are related to those choices. Now, there are lots of different work values, but there are 4 primary work values that we're going to talk about today. The first reason why many people choose a job, a career, or pathway is an intrinsic value. It's this idea that I want to love my work. I want to be interested in what I'm doing. I want to be passionate about it. And also, there's this idea that you want to have autonomy over your work. You want to have your sort of piece of the pie that you get to own and add to the larger contribution of the puzzle. And what's interesting around intrinsic, and it will make more sense when you see all 4 work values, but younger generations are increasingly opting towards careers based on intrinsic values. And why researchers believe this is happening is that many younger generations have grown up, particularly my generation. I'm an elder millennial. So as an elder millennial, many of us grew up with parents who were in jobs that they were fully committed to and maybe worked in for a long time, but maybe we watched our parents not loving our jobs. That we watched our parents doing work because that's what you do. You do this job, but we didn't watch our parents loving their careers. And this has been a general shift of younger generations of saying, you know what, I want to love my work. If I'm going to spend this much time doing it, I want to do something that's meaningful, important to me. And so that's what the generation researchers are anticipating is the reason why, is because they've seen an increase in the extrinsic and a decrease in extrinsic and prestige values that we'll talk about next. So extrinsic values is this idea that you want to make money and that you want to have job security. We've already talked about some of the statistics around STEM careers, and that when you look at all of the jobs using STEM skills, including those in health and medicine, they again represent 70% of the highest 150 paying jobs in the country. So again, if you want to have a high-paying job in our country, then your best bet is to choose a STEM pathway. Texas Instruments, I have a lot of friends who still work there, and I always kid them this time of year, and usually around middle of February. They get profit sharing, and TI's been doing really well, and so this year they got just over 20% bonus profit sharing. So what that means is that you take their annual salary and that they get a 20% bonus in February based on their salary. So if their annual salary is $100K, they get a $20,000 check in February. And I always joke with them, telling them that they're buying dinner this time of year. And so that's a great incentive to stay within that field and that industry if that is one of your key interests and values is having that kind of income. Also, at this time of year, you see lots of new cars in the parking lot and lots of new Teslas and things like that. And so this extrinsic value is this idea that you want to have security in your life and those extrinsic kinds of things. The next key work value are prestige values. This idea that you want to be respected for your occupation, respected for your role and the contribution that you play. And as I said earlier, the most common undergraduate degree among Fortune 500 CEOs is engineering. And so that again tells us that that engineers are great problem solvers and then make great leaders in these kinds of things as well. Now again, it's the most common undergraduate degree, so it means 1 in 5. So it means that more people have an engineering degree as Fortune 500 CEOs than they do a business degree or any other kind of degree. And the fourth key work value, and something I suspect resonates the most with each of you as counselors, is this social value, this idea that you want to work with people and that you want to contribute to society. And so why I'm presenting to you these 4 values is that there is a strong correlation between how well your job career aligns with your work values and job satisfaction. So even if you, as an individual, if you reflected back on your life to think about the jobs that you were in where you were like the most miserable or unhappy, there's a good chance that 1, you either had a bad boss, or 2, there was a poor alignment with that job and your work values. And our work values can change over time. But this is important to help our students begin to recognize what are some of the things that they value. And again, in the toolkit, you'll find a work values activity that you can do with students. And we have this available in both English and Spanish. And I think the last one that I talked about is also available in Spanish. And then there's a lesson plan that you can do with students. And so you have the toolkit, and then if you want to download digital printer-friendly versions, you can do that from NAPE's website as well. Also in the toolkit is a great exploration activity where your students can dive in to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So it's sort of a scaffolded exercise where they can go and explore different careers in STEM. And so you have that available to you as well, because what I don't want you to take away is this idea that you have to have all the answers and know all the jobs, because you can't and you won't. And so I encourage you to do that activity with your students. So I want to wrap up here and remind you the key takeaways. So the first thing is that we want to be able to use positive messaging. We want to explain the value of STEM careers using positive messaging that is attractive to and equitable for a diverse group of students. We want to encourage more women and students of color to choose these STEM pathways. Second, we want to incorporate the benefits of STEM careers into discussions that will appeal to work values of students of different class, race, and gender. And so we don't always want to talk about STEM as STEM equals money. We want to make sure that they understand that STEM equals ability to work with others and to collaborate and to make a difference in our world. And then finally, we want to really change our practice to make sure that we are advising a diverse group of students into a variety of pathways and opportunities in STEM careers. As I close, and before you shift gears today, whether you're here with us live or listening to the recording, is I want you to think about what are some things that you learned in this hour? What are 2 things that you will choose to do differently as a result of what you've learned? And then finally, I want you to note what's one thing that you will do different this week. What's one immediate action item that you want to take and put into place in your work? I encourage you, if you want to add some of those comments in the field, I would love to hear how you're going to take this and apply it. And then again, before we close, we welcome your thoughts and evaluations, and you can complete an evaluation of this workshop at bit.ly/NAPE survey, and it is case sensitive. And so I want to thank you all so much for your time today. And as if you are participating in this larger program that we're doing with your group, you'll see this quote over and over again. But I want you to take this with you and really think about it and reflect that the single story creates stereotypes. And the problem with stereotypes is not that they are untrue, but that they are incomplete. They make that one story become the only story. And so we want to push on those boundaries of those stereotypes, and we want to increase the narrative of opportunities and pathways that our students can see themselves in a STEM career. Thank you so much for your time today. I'm really grateful for your participation, and you can reach out to me if you have any questions. And at this time, I will turn it over to Amy if you'd like to wrap up. Dr. Julian?
Thank you so much, Megan. That was fantastic, and I hope you all enjoyed the webinar today. As I said, we are going to be having our third part to this series. Will be on May 23rd, and all of you will be receiving registration information if you have not seen that already, and we'll be sharing that within the next couple days. If you do have any questions, comments, or if you'd like to have any of the workbooks that she mentioned, please let me know. We will send those out to you, and just thank you all for attending, and thank you, Megan, for a great presentation.